They fired me because a 27-year-old MBA, who still needed Google to convert inches to feet, made an Excel sheet that said my department was overstaffed. 23 years of running payroll for a construction firm, managing hundreds of workers, keeping audits clean, and making sure every man on every site was paid down to the last overtime minute, and suddenly I was inefficient. The kid had been at the company for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. And the CFO believed him over me. The hook? The very Excel sheet he built, the one used to justify eliminating my position, was the same sheet that would expose a 6-figure embezzlement trail and pull the entire company apart by its rusted bolts. I learned I was being replaced on a humid Monday morning in June. I walked into my office and found the CFO, Jason, a man with a perpetual smirk and a personality made entirely of LinkedIn buzzwords, leaning against my desk. Next to him stood the MBA kid, Evan, wearing loafers with no socks and clutching a laptop like a shield. Jason cleared his throat like he was about to announce a promotion, not a firing. "Tom, we've reviewed the workflow structures and found that payroll processing can be optimized. Evan's new automation system will streamline the department. Today will be your final day." I stared at Evan. His face was full of nervous pride, the kind of confidence only someone who's never been punched by life can have. "You think payroll is just formulas?" I asked. "You think construction workers punch in like accountants? Half our guys can't even get service on site to clock in. You think this spreadsheet handles that?" Jason stepped forward. "The decision is final." So that was it. 23 years traded in for an Excel file built by a kid who had never set foot on a job site. I packed my things, shook hands with a few guys in the hallway who'd heard what happened, and walked out. But I didn't leave empty-handed. Because the moment Evan opened his mouth and bragged about how he reverse-engineered my system, something clicked. He didn't know he had done it. But the idiot had copied every single formula, every macro, and every lookup range directly from my old system, including the hidden one. The one I used to flag suspicious entries. The one nobody knew about but me. The one hard-coded to alert me if certain managers were skimming from payroll hours. A system I built quietly, because I'd seen strange patterns, ghost workers, padded hours, job site budgets that didn't match labor logs. Evan had taken my system. But he hadn't understood it. And that was going to burn them. 2 weeks later, I got the call from a foreman who'd trusted me for years. "Tom, the payroll's a mess. Guys didn't get paid right. Something's wrong." I told him I wasn't with the company anymore. He said, "Then you need to see this," and forwarded me photos of the new payroll slips. They weren't just wrong. They were altered. Numbers didn't line up with job hours. Fringe pay vanished. Deductions changed. Someone had messed with the formulas. And the hidden fraud trigger system? It was doing exactly what it was designed to do, flagging every irregularity. The foreman sent a screenshot of Evan's Excel sheet. In the corner, a small red triangle blinked, the indicator of my hidden macro firing off silent alarms. The same macro that automatically created a duplicate log file every time it detected falsified labor hours. A duplicate log file that, as I built it, auto-emailed to the inbox of whichever address was listed as admin archive. And guess what Jason never bothered to update? I opened my personal email. Dozens, literal dozens, of flagged fraud reports were sitting there, time-stamped from the last 2 weeks. Hours billed to workers who hadn't been on site. Payments routed to ghost employees. Shift logs altered by 3 managers. A supervisor approving his own overtime. Total fraud, $163,400. All in less than a month. They fired me to optimize payroll. They fired me to save money. Instead, they put a toddler behind the wheel of a bulldozer. I compiled every auto-generated report into a single file, added a summary explaining the system Evan had unknowingly activated, and sent the package to the board of directors, the State Labor Commission, and the external auditors. 30 minutes later, after sending the emails, I received the first reply from a board member. "Tom, can you speak on a call in 1 hour?" I joined the call. 10 faces stared at me, none of them smiling. They weren't interested in my resume. They wanted answers. They wanted names. And they wanted to know how a payroll system they never asked about had caught nearly $200,000 of internal theft in 2 weeks. I told them everything. How Evan copied my formulas. How Jason ignored warnings. How certain managers had been padding hours for years. How I built a private fraud detection script to protect the workers. By the end, several board members were red-faced with fury. 2 hours later, news broke internally. Jason, CFO, fired 3 site managers, terminated Evan the Excel prodigy, resigned, escorted out, and the company sent a formal apology to every worker who had been underpaid. A week after that, the CEO asked to meet me for coffee. He offered me my job back. I declined. "Tom," he said, "we'll match anything you want." I smiled. "I don't want a job. I want what you never gave me, respect. And I already earned that on my own." I left him sitting there, realizing the truth. I didn't lose my job to an Excel sheet. I lost it to arrogance. And arrogance is the one formula no spreadsheet can fix. But exposing $163,000 worth of fraud? That's the kind of math they'll be feeling for years. Jason's firing made the news inside the company faster than any quarterly report ever had. Word traveled from job site to job site, foremen whispering, laborers smirking, operators shaking their heads as they texted their crew. They all knew the truth. I hadn't been streamlined. I'd been underestimated. And in construction, underestimating the one guy who understands the books is about as smart as building a tower on wet sand. But the fallout wasn't finished, not even close. 2 days after I rejected the CEO's offer, I got a call from a law firm I recognized immediately. They handled wage disputes, class settlements, and labor rights cases for half the state's construction workers. The partner on the line, a calm woman with the voice of someone who had sunk many corporations without raising her tone, said, "We've reviewed the fraud packet you sent the auditors. Would you be willing to speak with us about a potential case? Several workers have reached out." I agreed. Not for revenge. Not to punish the company. But because the guys I'd managed payroll for, men who sweated through winters and bled through summers, deserved better. Our meeting turned into 3. 3 turned into 7. And what started as a few payment irregularities ballooned into a full-blown wage theft investigation that dated back years. Years of quiet discrepancies I had noticed in passing but never had the authority to pursue. Years of managers shifting hours to cover their own tracks. Years of guys working overtime that somehow, mysteriously, never made it onto their checks. The law firm built a case so tight it could suffocate steel. And when the court filings finally hit, they hit hard. 121 workers joined the lawsuit. $3.8 million in back wages and penalties. CEO named. CFO named. 3 managers named. The story went public. Local news picked it up. Then state news. Then one national outlet did a segment on payroll whistleblowers in the trades. And somehow, overnight, I became the guy who took on his company and won. But here's the twist nobody saw coming. 3 competing construction firms reached out not to hire me, but to offer me partnerships. Not job offers. Not salaries. Partnerships. They wanted me to build payroll integrity systems from the ground up. They wanted me to train their finance teams. They wanted me to oversee compliance so they never ended up like the company that fired me. I chose the smallest company of the three, a local outfit run by people who still visited their job sites in steel-toe boots instead of polished loafers. We grew fast. Too fast. Within 8 months, we tripled in size. Within a year, we won 3 government contracts that had previously belonged to my old employer. Within 18 months, we absorbed one of their regional divisions after their reputation collapsed. And Jason, the CFO who fired me with a smirk, he tried applying to my new company. HR forwarded me his resume. I recognized it instantly, the bullet points, the fake humility, the inflated achievements. I wrote one comment at the top of his application: this candidate's spreadsheet skills are not compatible with our standards. We didn't hire him. As for Evan, the MBA, last I heard, he was giving Excel workshops online for $29 a session. So yeah, they fired me for an MBA spreadsheet. They replaced a man who knew payroll inside out with a kid who only knew formulas. But the thing about formulas is simple: if you enter garbage, you get garbage. If you build with lies, you collapse under truth. And if you fire the wrong man, he'll rebuild the industry without you. The lawsuit payout nearly buried them, but the long tail of consequences, that was the part nobody anticipated. Companies can survive fines. They can survive apologies. They can even survive scandal if they're big enough. But what they can't survive is losing trust. And that's what came next. Suppliers who had worked with them for decades suddenly demanded upfront payment. General contractors stopped listing them as preferred bidders. A major union suspended cooperation until they proved a complete cultural overhaul. And the city, God bless them, froze 3 of their active permits pending labor compliance reviews, which everyone knew was bureaucratic code for "you messed up, and we're going to dig until we find the bones." Their project pipeline dried up. Their bids lost. Their top talent left for companies with cleaner reputations. And even the workers who stayed did so only until something better came along. Within 9 months of my firing, the firm that once strutted around the region as a construction titan was reduced to begging for mid-tier contracts and pleading with banks for restructuring loans. And the irony? The only person who understood the internal systems well enough to help them navigate the mess, the only one who could have salvaged their back end, was me. But I was too busy. Because while they sank, I was rising. The small outfit I'd partnered with, Hawthorne Construction Solutions, had grown into something real, something honest, something built on trust instead of spreadsheets manipulated by clueless executives. Our integrity systems became a selling point. Clients told us, "We want the payroll guy who caught $3.8 million in fraud running our books." Workers talked. Foremen told subcontractors. Subcontractors told other firms. We started getting calls from places I'd never imagined. Within 18 months, we weren't small anymore. We were lean. Sharp. Trusted. We were the company workers hoped would win their contracts. And then came the day everything came full circle. I was reviewing bids for a city infrastructure project when I saw a familiar name on the competitor list: my old employer. Or rather, what was left of it. Their CFO was gone. CEO under investigation. 3 project managers facing charges. And the shell of a company attempting to put together a bid that looked more like a plea for relevance. We outbid them. Not by undercutting, but by proving we could finish the job without cheating anyone. Every worker got full pay. Every hour was logged. Every audit passed. When the city awarded us the contract, someone forwarded me a clip from the council meeting where the vote happened. One council member said, "We're choosing Hawthorne because they employ the man who exposed the largest payroll fraud case in our district's construction history." And that hit deep. Not because of pride. Not because of revenge. But because after 23 years of being treated like a replaceable spreadsheet operator, someone finally understood what the job really meant. Accountability, accuracy, fairness, and the responsibility to protect workers whose sweat built everything around us. But the final twist came a year after that. I received an email, not from the CEO, not from Jason, not from any manager who once dismissed me. It was from a worker at my old company. Tom, they're shutting down. Completely. They said the lawsuits, audits, and fines did what the recession couldn't. Attached was a photo. The company sign being taken down. Letters pried off one by one. A forklift lowering the steel frame that once held their name high over the highway. 23 years I gave them. They fired me in 10 minutes. And yet, in the end, I didn't destroy them. They destroyed themselves the moment they trusted a spreadsheet over the man who built their foundation. All I did was tell the truth. And the truth did the rest. The day they shut down for good should have felt like victory. Justice. Revenge. Closure. But what I felt instead was quiet. Not relief. Not triumph. Just the strange stillness that comes after a storm you waited years to see, only to realize the thunder wasn't as loud as you imagined. I sat in my office, my new office, sunlight pouring across the blueprints pinned to the wall, and stared at the photo of their sign coming down. For years, that logo had been the emblem of stability in my life. My mortgage, my kids' school fees, my savings, my identity, tied to a building that could have protected me, could have valued me, but chose to throw me out because a kid with an MBA built a pretty spreadsheet. Now it was scrap metal. But the part that stuck with me wasn't the collapse. It was the message that came a few hours later. My phone buzzed. A name appeared that I hadn't seen in years, Luis Ramirez. Luis had been with the company longer than I had. A man built of concrete and grit, whose handshake could crush a walnut. He had worked jobs no one else wanted, climbed scaffolding in storms, slept in his truck on double shifts. He'd trusted that company like it was family. I answered immediately. "Tom," he said, voice rough. "I just wanted to say, whatever happens next, thank you. You saved a lot of us." I didn't know what to say. I still don't. Luis continued, "They were stealing from us for years. We would have never known. They treated us like machines. You treated us like men." He paused. "They might be gone. But we ain't. And because of you, our kids eat better. Our wives sleep better. Our men stand a little taller on site." I swallowed hard. It hit deeper than I expected. After we hung up, I sat there, staring at my desk, feeling the weight of something bigger than revenge, responsibility. I had spent months thinking the story was about a company losing millions, executives losing their power, an empire crumbling under the weight of its own greed. But I was wrong. It was about the men and women who built everything that company ever bragged about. It was about the workers whose hours were stolen, whose overtime was buried, whose livelihoods were tampered with for someone else's promotion. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't since long before they fired me: purpose. 2 weeks later, we hired 20 more employees, many of them from my old company. We expanded our worker safety division. We started an apprentice program. We doubled our compliance team. And I built something new, something personal. A department dedicated entirely to payroll integrity, staffed with experts and coders and auditors. Not to catch companies, but to prevent them from becoming the kind that needed catching. Companies lined up for the service. Workers appreciated it. And more importantly, it changed the culture of every project we touched. We weren't just building structures. We were building trust. Months later, at a labor conference, someone introduced me as the man who brought accountability back to construction. I shook my head and corrected them. No. I just did the math. And maybe that's the truest ending of all. They fired me because they thought I was just the payroll guy. They thought I added numbers. They never realized I was adding truth. And truth, once revealed, doesn't just collapse corrupt companies, it builds better ones in their place. But the story didn't end at conferences or quiet victories. It kept unfolding, slowly, steadily, with the same patient inevitability as concrete curing under sun. A few months after the collapse, I got an unexpected invitation. A keynote. For the National Construction Standards Summit. Me, the guy who used to sit in a dim office correcting decimal errors and approving overtime slips while upper management pretended payroll didn't matter. Now they wanted me to speak to an auditorium full of CEOs, CFOs, regulators, union heads, and project directors. The irony wasn't lost on me. When I arrived, people actually recognized me. Not from newspapers or interviews, but from the story. The story of a man who caught a multi-million-dollar fraud because someone tried to replace him with a spreadsheet. Backstage, an older executive approached. Hair white as gypsum dust, suit sharp enough to cut steel. "You're the one who took down Grand Ridge Construction, right?" I nodded cautiously. He stuck out his hand. "Good. They deserved it." Everyone knew something was rotten in that place. Nobody had the guts, or the evidence, to do what you did. I shook his hand, but the compliment didn't feel like praise. It felt like a reminder of how many people had looked the other way. When my turn came, I walked onto the stage to a room that felt unexpectedly silent. Not politely silent, attentive silent. I didn't talk about betrayal, or humiliation, or revenge, even though everyone expected a triumphant downfall story. Instead, I told them about Luis. About the apprentices whose wages were siphoned. About the single parents who depended on every hour being counted. About the immigrants who worked harder than anyone and got cheated the most. About the foremen who fought to keep their crews fed. About the quiet men who'd break their backs before they'd admit they were struggling. I told them payroll wasn't numbers. Payroll was people. And that the moment you forget that, your company has already begun to rot from the inside. When I finished, the room didn't clap immediately. There was a moment, a long, weighty moment, where dozens of leaders sat still, processing something they didn't expect to hear. Then the applause came. Loud. Sustained. Not for me, but for the message. After the talk, a young woman approached, maybe mid-20s, wearing a contractor badge. "Sir," she said softly, "your story, it helped me realize something. My company doesn't treat our people right. I want to help fix that. How do I start?" Her eyes were clear. Determined. A spark I hadn't seen in myself for years, until recently. I gave her the same advice my father gave me on my first day in construction: start by listening. Workers will tell you the truth long before spreadsheets will. She nodded thoughtfully, writing it down like it was more important than the formulas in her binder. And in that moment, I realized something: revenge hadn't been the ending. It was only the pivot. The real legacy was what came after. A year later, the company I helped build had become the gold standard in payroll integrity. We were invited onto billion-dollar projects, not to investigate, but to prevent mistakes, fraud, and exploitation before they could happen. Contractors trusted us. Workers respected us. Executives listened to us. And the men who once fired me for being replaceable had become a cautionary tale in business schools about what happens when leadership ignores the people keeping their foundation upright. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's not a collapse, not a scandal, not a headline. Sometimes justice is quiet, a slow, steady rebuilding of the world in a better shape than you found it. And I realized that the truest revenge wasn't destroying their company. It was proving, without saying a word, that I had been essential all along. Not because I caught the fraud. Not because they needed me. But because I turned the worst thing they did to me into the best thing I ever did for others. The final piece fell into place nearly a year after everything collapsed. I was standing on the balcony of our new headquarters, a renovated warehouse turned payroll auditing hub, watching crews pour concrete for a neighboring project. The rhythmic clang of rebar, the barked orders, the dust rising in sunlit ribbons, it felt like home. Honest work. Real work. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Grand Ridge Construction files for bankruptcy. Below it, former VP and CFO under federal investigation for systemic payroll fraud. I didn't smile. Not even a little. I didn't need to. Their downfall wasn't my victory anymore. It was a footnote, an inevitable result of their own greed, nothing more. I put the phone away and leaned on the railing. The foreman below, Luis, now promoted, looked up and gave me a thumbs up. His crew had just finished under budget and on time. No missing hours. No stolen pay. No MBA mistakes. For the first time in my life, I felt something heavier than revenge, deeper than triumph, purpose. All the humiliation, the wrongful firing, the sham investigation, their attempt to erase me, none of it destroyed me. It redirected me. They pushed me out of a small office. I walked into an entire industry. They took my job. I built a company. They mocked my old school methods. I proved they were the only thing keeping their walls from collapsing. And the people they exploited, the ones they assumed were voiceless, were now the heart of my mission. I turned to go back inside. On the doorframe, a small plaque hung, "Integrity is the strongest material." I didn't put it there. My team did. And that was the real ending, not a dramatic takedown, not a ruinous collapse, but a quieter, sturdier truth. In construction, everything rests on the foundation. And in life, my foundation, built of fairness, grit, and the refusal to look the other way, had outlasted every shortcut, every con, every MBA's efficient spreadsheet. The company that fired me was gone. But the world I rebuilt afterward, that was built to last.